Welcome to the Stoic Responder Podcast. I'm your host, Christopher Healy. As a special agent who spent more than 15 years conducting large-scale fraud, money laundering, and public corruption investigations, Stoic philosophy provided a mindset edge that became the foundation of my professional success. My mission today is to share those same ancient mindset lessons with you so that you can turn obstacles into opportunities and adversity into advantage. Time to muster up. Hey, welcome back to the Stoic Responder Podcast. This is episode 55. Check your hatred. Before we get started, folks, I wanted to remind you of our favorite 501c3 organization that supports the law enforcement community, and that is the Overwatch Collective. The Overwatch Collective is a nonprofit and podcast funding therapy sessions and supporting mental health initiatives for our first responders, our veterans, and their families. Their motto is one more is one less, and I take that to heart because one more individual we can provide life-saving therapeutic services to is one less potential statistic. Check them out over at theoverwatchcollective.com. Follow them on social media. Check out the podcast. Send some support their way if you can. Buy some of their gear. Whatever you got to do, make sure these guys have the funds and the means to continue this very important mission. Number two, I want to give a shout out to our friends at Blue Badge Coffee Company. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see the cool hat that I'm wearing from Blue Badge Coffee Company. The mission over at Blue Badge is to provide customers with the best, highest quality premium coffee that money can buy. They also take a portion of each sale and donate it to law enforcement agencies around our great nation to assist them in funding and maintaining peer support and wellness programs for their officers. Nothing could be more important right now with the recruitment issues that we're dealing with in law enforcement. We need great wellness and peer support programs to help retain good officers because we're having so much trouble finding good ones to bring on board. We got to make sure we're taking care of the people that we have. Blue Badge Coffee Company is helping to do that by supporting these critical programs. They're crucial for the physical and mental well-being of hardworking officers in the law enforcement agencies across our country. So check them out. Get yourself some coffee. Get yourself some sweet merch. Go support them over at bluebadgecoffee.com. All right, as I said, the title of this episode is Check Your Hatred. Let me start you out with a quote from Seneca. We advise a man to regard his friends as highly as himself, to reflect that an enemy may become a friend, to stimulate love in the friend, and to check hatred in the enemy. All right, so a Stoic start that again. A Stoic approach to relationships emphasizes the importance of cultivating virtue, fostering goodwill, maintaining a sense of equanimity, that inner peace, that inner citadel that we talk about, and reason in interactions with others while cautioning us against the dangers of hatred, right? So we have to be reasonable, we have to be virtuous, and we have to be cautious not to allow our passions to get inflamed, not to allow the passions of the moment to create a sense of hatred. Why is that? Because Seneca, in a very similar vein to his first century contemporary Jesus, spoke a lot about the corrosive nature of hatred from a moral perspective, from an ethical perspective. And he noted how it is often just as destructive to hate an individual. In other words, it's just as destructive to the hater to hate an individual as it is to the person who is being hated. So it's better in his reasoning and his approximation to forgive those that have harmed you than to keep that hatred in your heart, keep that hatred in your soul, because it's deeply corrosive. Maybe the best, I think, literary example of this is the great American novel, Moby Dick. It's often been interpreted as an allegory for this kind of dark aspect of human nature, for the destructive and primal instincts that lie beneath the surface that cause this corrosive hatred in us, right? And so I'm going to, if you haven't read Moby Dick, spoiler alert, we're going to give away the plot here, but I assume since it's been out since like 1840 that you have probably read it, or that if you wanted to read it, you would have done so by now. So let me give you the Cliff's Notes version here. In Moby Dick, the whale embodies the power of our most base instincts. It serves as a reminder of the potential for violence, the potential for chaos, the potential of destructive forces that can be unleashed when we lose touch with our humanity, when we lose touch with our reason, when we lose touch with our moral and ethical restraint. On the other side of the coin, the captain, this enigmatic Captain Ahab, who's driven by his desire for vengeance, he becomes consumed by the singular purpose of hunting down and killing the individual who took his limb, the individual being the whale. I don't mean to, anthropomorphize the whale, but he becomes obsessed with hunting down and getting vengeance on this beast that took his limb. Now, Ahab's hatred, again, spoiler alerts here. Ahab's hatred, it kind of takes precedence over all other aspects of his life. He's this enigmatic captain. People don't really know much about him, but he is driven by this desire to gain vengeance on this whale. And that means that nothing else matters, right? The safety and life and welfare of his crew members, the well-being of the ship, the Pequod, none of it matters. And as the climatic battle between Moby Dick and the Pequod eventually unfolds, it's Ahab's obsession with revenge that drives him to the brink of madness and ultimately leads to his demise and to the loss of so many lives and the loss of his ship. Look, folks, at one point or another, we have all kind of felt like Ahab, right? We've all felt like there was something out there like Moby Dick that we just were consumed by and angry about. I can tell you my personal story about that in a very brief kind of encapsulation. And some of you know this story because you've heard this before, but I was promised a promotion by my agency, by a special agent in charge in my agency. He kind of tagged me to go open up an office, to move, to sell my house, to uproot, all on my own dime. He talked me into it with the promise of promoting me to the assistant special agent in charge once that office was open. So I did what he asked for. I sold my house. I pitched my family on moving. We moved. My wife closed her business down. We relocated, bought a new house, all of this out of my own pocket, all at my own expense, helped stand up this office, set this office up. And about 6 or 7 months later, after this office is up and running, and I've done all this work, I've done everything to uphold what was asked of me, my side of the bargain, the announcement goes out. And my boss, the guy who tapped me to open this office and do all of this, he ends up giving the vacant position, giving the promotion to a good friend of his, a guy he had a hunting lease with, a guy who was a buddy, a guy who he was very, very close with. Now, there's not much you can do about that. And it ate at me, and it caused a lot of anger because I felt betrayed. I had been lied to. I had been used. I had been used to open up this office, to do all the hard work, to put my back into it, my blood, sweat, and tears, to open up relationships with other people around the region, to establishing ourselves there, to creating this space and doing all that was asked of me, only to have the promotion that I had been promised be given to a friend. A patron, classic patronage hire, classic sort of law enforcement thing. This happens, right? I didn't know how to deal with that. I was angry. I had tremendous hatred in my heart, not just for my boss, for what he had done to me, but for the guy that he hired, who hadn't really done anything to me except, be gifted a position that I felt was owed to me and that had been promised to me. And I maintained and kept this anger in me. And I can tell you that it had that deeply corrosive effect on me, on my personal relationships, on my work relationships, on how I got along with other people. It ate away at me. It caused me massive amounts of stress that I didn't need, that had a downstream impact on my relationships with my family, on how I lived my life. I gained a bunch of weight. That anger caused hatred has a weight to it. A lot of it was inflammation. A lot of it was my body being under this tremendous amount of stress and feeling angry all the time, but it caused inflammation. It caused me to be unhealthy. It caused me to not sleep well. I got deeper into bad habits. I was drinking more. I very rarely drink. I might have 1 or 2 drinks a month, but I was drinking daily, every evening, because I was so angry to have to go to an office and have to report to somebody who I felt was sitting in my chair. That was my Moby Dick. I filed complaints. I wrote it up. There was a nepotism angle that was additionally involved that caused me a great amount of concern, because by promoting that guy, he put him in charge of his own brother-in-law, which is a federal crime. It's illegal. So there were all sorts of issues, but I was just so tore up and angry and hate and had so much hatred about this situation. And it had this, as we said, a deeply corrosive effect and destructive impact on me, far more than it had a destructive impact on the person that I was directing that hate to. You see, nothing happened to them. My anger directed at my boss. He ended up promoting. He went up to headquarters. He got a SES level position. He retired, as an SES. The guy that got the job, that got placed into that position, he got promoted up to headquarters eventually. He went up there and he got a high level. He may be an SES now. He's still employed. He, got a high level position far above. So all of my anger, all of my hatred, it had zero impact on their career trajectory, but it had a ton of impact on my own well-being, on my own health. It was far more corrosive and far more destructive to my well-being than it was to the people who I had such anger towards. So it's very similar. Moby Dick is a cautious tale in that regard. Now, my career didn't explode or blow up or anything. I was able to get a hold of things. I didn't, ram the Pequod into Moby Dick and take everybody down with the ship. I was able to pull myself out of this, but it took several months. And by any objective perspective you could look at, I was at that point suffering from depression. I had put myself with so much anger and so much hatred in my heart into literally a point of depression. And that is the cautionary tale. And that is what Seneca is telling us. Because at the end of the day, for the rest of my career lasted for another 6 years before I left the agency. I still had to work with these people. I still had to, it was a small agency. I still had to be respectful and work with these people and get along with these people. And carrying that hatred in your heart, that anger in your heart, is deeply caustic, deeply corrosive to your own well-being and has almost no impact whatsoever on the people you're directing it towards. And that's what Seneca is telling us here. He's essentially saying that, no matter what, you should regard people, whoever they are, as highly as you regard yourself, and reflect that the enemy that you're so angry at may someday become a friend. Same thing that Jesus is saying, right? Love thy neighbor. Love those people around you. Treat them well. Jesus hung out with tax collectors, and those are the worst, right? Hung out with tax collectors and lepers and prostitutes and sinners, all of that same stuff. The people that you were supposed to look down on and have disdain and hatred for, he loved them as he would love himself and equals. And that sustains you instead of corroding you. So aside from story time with Christopher, I guess the tale that we take out of this is that at one point or another, we have all felt the same desire for revenge that took hold of Ahab. But if we're honest with ourselves, as I have been with myself, the pursuit likely did more harm to our own psyche than good. Folks, take out your big chief notebook and your pencil. Write this one down. Here's your journal prompt for the day. What good has the pursuit of revenge ever done for me? I can answer this question very, very plainly. It's done no good for me. That anger, that hatred did nothing for me other than to, again, cause psychological turmoil and distress and even physical distress. Did no good beyond that. And none of those things are good. So write it down. What good has the pursuit of revenge ever done for me? And be honest with yourself. Folks, thanks for listening to this episode. If you'd like to support this podcast, there's a couple ways you can do it. Number one, you can pick up a copy of my book, In Valor 365, Stoic Meditations for First Responders. It's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Walmart, anywhere you get your books. You can get it on ebook like Kindle or Nook, or you can get it in paperback. If you like to take notes, you want to do your journal entries right in the book, I highly encourage it. I love doing that myself. This is a great way for you to practice this philosophy daily. It's going to give you quotes, contextualization. They're directly relatable to your job as a first responder, and it's going to give you daily journal prompts and action items to help you integrate the lessons. Number two, you can support this podcast by subscribing to my Substack at thestoicresponder.substack.com for free. On that page, you can get the podcast delivered to your email 4 times a week. You're also going to get my weekly newsletter, sometimes 2 newsletters a week, usually 1, but sometimes more than 1. You're going to get my weekly newsletter with Stoic leadership and personal development tips. That's the only place you're going to get that. So make sure you go over and subscribe at thestoicresponder.substack.com for free. And finally, the best way to subscribe to support this podcast, and the easiest way, is to like, share, and subscribe so that others can learn about what we're doing here and find this podcast. If you got somebody who needs to hear this message, if you've got somebody who is Captain Ahab chasing their own white whale and they could use a reminder of the corrosive effects of hatred, go ahead and share this episode with them directly. Folks, thanks so much for tuning in. As I said, I've got 2 more episodes for you this week, and may have a bonus episode if time allows. So we'll catch you all again tomorrow. Until next time, you are out of roll. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to subscribe, like, rate, and share this podcast so that we can spread the benefits of Stoicism to other first responders. It will only take you a few moments, but it can help us tremendously. Until next time, out of roll.